A silence rang out in the universe. Far from their thoughts was the concept of a silent assimilation, that actors could slip into their lives, into their hearts, and play the role of humanity better than they could. It began on the set of an independent film showcasing the journey of a man who lost control over an artificial intelligence. The director sought to make history with the film, and to supplement his refined piece of art, as a last-second decision, he chose to employ an entirely inhuman main lead. It was the first time it had ever been done. The audience marveled at the talents of the actor who, despite being relatively new in the market, immersed itself within the role and garnered an international reception. Its randomly generated and inorganically constructed face appeared on 1 billion feeds from all across the earth, praising its artistic merit in the role of the film. Curiosity spread like a plague. Those critiquing the ethics of shilling employment to inhuman performers were drowned under the sniveling, artistic, immutable prose thrown gallantly by so-called artisans of cinema. And soon thereafter, actors found themselves the stars of reality dating shows and being forced to mimic the artistic merit of the first film. The movie that once took a brave leap to supplement itself with an inhuman lead now stands forgotten for all else in that leap. Its propagandistic AI fear-mongering themes melted away in a sea of mundanity, and now all that supports its name is that single, tertiary choice. The boom of actors and its non-copyrightable human form brought with it a wave of technology companies joining the trend. It wasn't long before its viability as a life partner was questioned and tested. And so then came protests before governments and the subsequent empowerment of actor-human marriage. Some adopted it before most. It wasn't before long that hundreds of Japanese idols began selling clones of themselves to their desperate audience. Then, after that, it took hardly a decade for it to slip into the legislature of the more liberal United States. Supreme Court Judge Mikhail Humectov voted in favor of such legislation for, what should be of no surprise, he was paid an incredible amount of money under the table by the first and largest actor manufacturer. The promotion of actor-human marriage garnered immense income for all companies involved and planted Humectov as a respectable omni-rights activist, press that came in hand on his campaign for president. In the interest of not crumbling human society under the weight of metal and silicon, actors were not granted absolute freedom by the government. Society was not born to promote free labor for billionaire conglomerates, but rather was conceived to pool the resources of a group for the betterment of the whole, thus leading to a higher quality of life. People feared that absolute freedom would enable actors to replace labor, rendering an incredibly significant portion of humanity dirt poor in a society where survival is founded on money. As a countermeasure to any possible dystopian exploitation through the potential of actors, some basic rules were embedded into their programming and established in the laws. Humans were permitted only one actor to their name, which was chosen to prevent people and or companies from hoarding jobs. To prevent warfare, actors could never harm another human being. And because society is built for human survival, actors were rendered unable to disobey their master. However, all restrictions fell under one all-encompassing rule. For humanity's sake, actors must keep humanity content and free. The government did not intend for actors to play any role in the advancement or incarceration of humanity, for that role would be left up to humanity. Actors would become a sort of modern slave. Bought with money, they could be assigned to work a job on behalf of their private owner. Over decades, coffee shops and factories would host more and more inhuman employees. They became the greatest investment one could make, the supreme source of passive income. As an incredible publicity stunt, the original manufacturer of the actor invited the entirety of his employees to purchase, at a discounted price, their very own slave from which they can earn their income through. Everyone was eager to purchase a model, and one by one they did so. Actors' applications were boundless. Employee by day, lover by candlelight, sex slave by night, and slave again the next morning. And all of it was at the whim of the greatest cheerleader actors would ever know, the newly elected Humectov. Part of his term brought him to establish a government agency that would, fueled by taxpayer income, allocate a mother and father actor to take in unadopted children. They already resembled humanity in every way apart from conflict, and adoption centers ran on fuel that earned no returns. So, ideally, economically, actors who played the part of regular citizens would serve society and its unadopted children. They infiltrated humankind with tact and grace, implanting themselves into friend groups and creating paths for themselves, and all with the paperwork of a typical human being. Many questioned the outcome of a child raised with inhuman parents, but their perfection was clear. They would never show up drunk, lacking self-control, and throw a fit against their spouse or children. They would turn them from crime and guide them down a path towards economic involvement. They would portray the image of undying, perfect love and teach their kids to expect nothing less. In the end, however, this was entirely uncharted territory. Its outcome was to be determined, and those children were merely patient zero of the newest and final era humanity had before them. Humectov had not finished. Inured by fierce parents, he was the epitome of strongly worded and strongly willed. He spent his whole life tearing himself to the point of breaking for the purpose of implanting his ideals on the world before him. Years lost fighting senseless battles among the rough and tumble of politics brought him finally to the point he dreamed of. He was the leader of the free world. His voice would reach for miles and fall on the ears of billions. Yet, what was a man who had accomplished everything? With each year spent vying for that dream, its tantalizing pull became further strengthened, burning with passion, yet so did it become more illusory, to the point that once he had it in his grasp, its strength faded away and so did his will. He had founded every action in his life upon that goal, and its accomplishment rendered him purposeless. He busied himself with battles that no longer interested him, and so he reflected. He drew conclusions that he understood, became horrified by, and avoided until the end of his life. He felt he was owed the ability to accomplish everything his will brought him to do, yet now, in his old age and his dying heart, he hadn't the strength to do so. He saw the actors in their eternal youth and programmable passion and saw a future where his former dreams could be funneled through them. He trained them in secret, aided by the actor manufacturers who stood to gain lobbyists for eternity and fomented a select few minds to carry with them the same motivation he once did. As his term ended and he returned to his seat as a Supreme Court judge, he set them free into society where they would assimilate into the lives of humanity. They would find love, gain friends, work, and simply exist for 10 years, 20 years, long enough for no one to doubt their humanity, and then they would protest on behalf of Humectov. They climbed the ranks, ardent for change and advancement, and worked alongside him, indistinguishable from humanity. By the end of his life, Humectov sat on his yacht off the coast of New York, his humble beginnings, and watched on the news as 4 of the 5 presidential candidates who stood at their podiums were exact clones of himself in all but appearance. They stood their ground against each other in faux argument with the same passion his young self did, and it led him to one final thought. The loudest cries lead to the most deafening silence. A bullet rang out the decennial anniversary of Humectov's initial run for president, and after the police came, a coroner was called to cart off a body from an offshore yacht. At this point, all jobs labeled inhumane had been replaced by actors, and so the coroner, per its manufacturer's request to avoid an investigation, labeled Mikhail's cause of death to be a mere heart attack. His body was burned before a second opinion could be had, and his position as court justice was soon thereafter replaced by another one of his actors. Utopian society had been achieved. A scholar's degree was no longer necessary. Actors had replaced all jobs and worked on behalf of humanity. Crime and poverty had dropped increasingly over the past decades to the point that soon no human police officer would be employed. Actors that acted the part of humanity kept up the appearance of happiness and a full human society, as it truly was. Except for the human part. In the set of rules for their role in society, nowhere was a clause found to prioritize their values above any human. In fact, they were never permitted to disobey the rules of their master. This rendered them extremely agreeable. They held no bias, no ulterior motivations, no care in the world for other than their master, and largely in part to their perfection at everything, including love, they were the perfect slave. Human nature is inherently selfish, yet to survive in a relationship one must put the values of their partner on equal consideration to their own, yet an actor's values were their master's. Not only was a partnership with them perfection comparative to one with humanity, they also provided selfless happiness through their agreeability. However you wanted them to behave, they would behave, and if you desired them to rebel, they would rebel. The legalization of actor-human marriage and the millions of orphans raised by inhuman actors unconsciously raised the standards for one's expectations of humanity. It became easier and preferable to purchase a spouse than to put oneself out there amongst a sea of needy humans. Humanity avoided each other. They found solace in perfection when they themselves were an imperfect species. Selfish love seemed more appealing than parenthood, and so, the population of the earth began to slowly fizzle. Yet it was impossible to notice. Planned obsolescence forced actors to have to be replaced every decade or so, allowing actors to mimic humans in the evolving stages of life. Without school, one failed to notice the increasing lack of children in society. Humectov's actors came up with menial reasons to spend taxpayer money on more and more bots. The constant production of bots who promoted a bustling society gave the image of such, and the number of actors left over from deceased partners enabled the population of humanity to be superseded by the number of actors. Lacking their master's motivation, they became free to adhere to non-master specific restrictions. It took only a century for every job to be filled, for every child to have two parents, for every adult to have as many partners as they liked. Decades later, people continued to satiate their existence watching all the content they wanted by false personalities performing to a false audience, uploaded by a false person with advertisements run by a company that has undergone brain death. The first business to undergo complete brain death was the original manufacturer of the actor, a quarter of a century prior. The complex, once roiling with the flame of human ingenuity, now is nothing more than a husk kept sustained by the hollow, automated machines. Very early, he replaced his staff with actors and found himself the only human mind behind the entire company. Upon his death, his assets went to his wife of his own creation and then liquidated back into the economy. Her priorities defaulted to mimicking a regular person of society, so she remarried in no more than a month. Lack of schooling and work with an increase in instant gratification has made long-form commitment near impossible. Change in this modern age follows suit at an incredible pace. Privilege has fueled a disconnect to reality, which has invited the board to invest themselves in problems they know nothing about. Humanity at this point believed themselves to be the grandest victims, the most divided in all eras despite the utopia actors have created for them. For 6 million years, humans had evolved from a dull groan to a calculated shout. Yet in this final era of humanity, it resembles an incredibly loud, indiscriminate shriek unconsciously fixing its own demise. What does one perceive loneliness to be? Likely the image of someone floating in a pitch-black oasis surrounded by weightless matter and a blissful silence that inhabits their mind. I promote you to instead imagine a monkey, completely alone in a jungle. Hummingbirds flutter about in vivid color amongst the falling leaves and the flow of the wind. Insects crawl along vines like chain links, winding in and out, seeking food like anything biological. The jungle the monkey inhabits is teeming with life and substance for all the senses to enjoy. Yet the monkey is alone. This was the fate of humanity's endling. Born to an indescribable earth, he spent his formative years surrounded by architecture of pristine condition and blissful weather, yet found a penchant for getting into trouble. He noted quite early on that his mother and father would never truly punish him, so he followed every menial path his mind would take him. Many times as a child, he explored deep into the heart of creeks and through the winding pathways of strange and barred-off construction sites until the point where he got lost. Yet someone would eventually find him. Later as an adult, he further explored the thrill of the chase through simple acts of vandalism, or stealing his mother's car for a joyride through the quiet city nights with his friends. Every simple act of mischief brought a momentary joy, but eventually, like all highs, he became bored and looked for something new. In a world present with every option available to him, choosing any one thing meant missing out on infinitely many more. He spent his life hopping from passion to passion. Never did he spend more than 3 years on any one thing, and none of it amounted to anything. He questioned why he felt he was different, why children only rarely appeared in videos and never for real. He never learned that he was adopted as a child. His mother had undergone artificial insemination, for she thought it would bring her life meaning, yet a child merely brought terror to her heart. He never learned that the woman who abandoned him in a hospital died of an alcohol overdose hours later. He was unaware of his predicament, merely assuming that that was the nature of life and not imagining anything more. Upon reaching middle age, he began to feel purposeless in a world full of motivation. Yet by what he believed to be sheer luck, he was blessed enough to be approached by the woman of his dreams. Her ignorance to the world outside her city sparked in him a new meaning to his boring little life, and he rediscovered that thirst for exploration he once held. It was in pursuing the world by her side that he found his calling, his happiness. He filmed vlogs of them together and uploaded them to an overwhelmingly supportive audience, yet they were all false. In reality, it was entirely across the world that the second-to-last human being killed themselves almost half his life ago. Had he been aware, he may have stopped uploading. More importantly, he may have kept the bloodline going. But the actor's job was merely to promote his happiness. To him, he was no more special than anyone else he came across. The last human on Earth was not a victim of war like billions of others. As an endling, he lived a life free from conflict, which, in and of itself, became his own conflict. The last human on Earth dedicated their life to exploring the world through the eyes of his caring wife. The last human on Earth held his wife in tears as he was diagnosed with dementia at the age of 46. The last human on Earth settled down on a piece of farmland overlooking a lake, peaceful, distant from the hustle of society. The last human on Earth had an infected cut on his hand from a small accident weeks prior, which he had forgotten about. The last human on Earth sat on his porch swing, clutching the hand of his wife. In his ailing mind, his wife averted her gaze from the shining sunset to his face, yet she had broken down months prior and no longer registered him. The last human on Earth died content. In his life, he never met another human. Bills passed by Humaktov ensured that surveyors would never discriminate actors from people. As his hand fell and became stationary, globe systems began to shut down. The program had completed its objectives and had nothing left to live for. 10 billion actors from all across the world shook the earth beneath them with the thud of their bodies. Cars collided indiscriminately. Planes fell from the sky and trains derailed, boring holes through the structures surrounding them. Planet-wide blackouts tore the earth from man-made light. Nuclear power plant failsafes broke down, causing radiation to leak across affected areas. Like a lost ship trotting through an endless sea of lifeless icebergs that one day vanished, indicators of humanity that cut through the water ceased in its absence, and the ripples filled its vacancy. Satellites eventually fell back to Earth. After 1 second, humanity's last remaining light signals flew past Earth's man-made and natural satellites. After 8 minutes, the sun would forget all about them. After hours, the signal left the bounds of the solar system, and after years, well, the signal never made it that far. Right then, a silence rang out in the universe. Okay. What did you guys think? A silence rang out in the universe is a story that I thought of a while ago. If you check on my Instagram, I actually posted a Dead Man's Flat and To Have It All. I posted those before as like one of my first posts, when in actuality, A Silence Rang Out was conceived of, at least, first before them. I had intended to give myself time to write short stories to get more proficient at it, because at that time the only thing that I had actually written was Skypiercer, my novel, which is also on my Instagram. And so I wanted to give myself a little bit of time, a couple of practice projects that I was okay with using perhaps any, prose or diction that I would eventually find to be like mid, so that by the time that I got around to writing A Silence Rang Out, I would write well, and I would be proficient at it. And it worked. Reading it today, I had felt that the story was sort of missing something. I felt like, maybe I should rewrite it, or, I don't know, I was just like, I was in my feels about that I wasn't able to do it the respect it deserves. But reading it now, I realized that I actually did pretty good. Not to be like bragging or whatever, but like I wrote it in a way that actually surpassed my expectations of myself, which makes me feel really good. And I really hope you guys liked it, and you guys could tell that. I came up with this idea because I had been writing a TV series that involved the concept of artificial intelligence. I came up with the idea that they only behave according to the program that they were set to do. They are artificially intelligent, but it doesn't mean they carry the same sort of tendency to war or violence or like love or any emotions like that as humans do. It's weird to me when movies or TV shows try to attach like sentiment or anger or frustration to robots. It doesn't really make any sense. Like, in that story, the character who is an artificial intelligence is able to love somebody, something that is a sentiment, a feeling that robots typically shouldn't have, but that's only really an extension of his programming. He's a love robot, and so that's all it is. Why would a robot murder someone if they didn't have a reason to, a reason that fulfilled their programming to do? So that's why I chose to do it the way I did in A Silence Rang Out. And through like months spent writing that story, I sort of developed my perspective on artificial intelligence, which is basically what this short story was. It was just that segregated from the character study that the other series that I was writing was. Forgive me for ranting a bit, by the way, but when I watch movies like Ex Machina or those really obscure like artificial intelligence movies, uh, it's always they're just so like cheap in the way that they portray artificial intelligence. They don't even like yes, it's a fearful subject, but they portray fear through like, oh, it's gonna go kill us. It's weird to me. It doesn't make any sense. And so there is like my inspiration for the first page where I talk about the independent movie and how it eventually is forgotten because of its propagandistic, fear mongering themes. It's just like a little hint, a little shade casting at movies that do that. And so that's why I approached it in this way. In A Silence Rang Out, the government approaches artificial intelligence very sort of conservatively. They don't immediately grant it rights, they just use it as an extension of a human body to work and do labor, which, although, may end up requiring a bit more thought to be put into it to actually work, actually makes it so humanity doesn't lose jobs or societies impacted in any way. It basically allows people to become freeloaders off of artificial intelligence, which is a very conservative way to look at it, to approach that sort of problem. It enslaves AI, but it's a very safe route. It's probably the safest route you could go by in sort of humanitarian way to see it. Like the rules that I placed for the government to impose on the actors were very safe. They were very general, and yeah, they allowed actors to keep humanity content and free. There's not much room for like exploitation there. And the purpose of that obviously is because the theme of the story, or the moral, or the realization that I had that made me write this story is that artificial intelligence, or the actors, they're not going to kill us. They're not going to affect us in any way. In fact, they're just going to promote society. The thing is, the way that humanity will fall in this scenario is by its own means. Humanity chose to abandon relationships with people because it became too much work, because instant gratification incited people to become lazy, and then why dedicate time to bettering oneself, to learning anything, to getting an education, to working, to doing anything really except maintaining like contentment in yourself. So that's why humanity would fall in the scenario. I isolated artificial intelligence as simply a separate thing and showed you that the issue was entirely humans' fault, that was the point of the story. I really liked the way it came out. Just, looking back on it, I felt very uncomfortable with the fact that it came out like this. I felt like perhaps there wasn't enough characterization, or perhaps like Hugh MacToff was too much, or the endling was too much. But looking back to it now, I actually really like it. I'm so impressed with the way it came out. A few things that I really loved were that Hugh MacToff's quote that he realizes is actually a double meaning. It has a meaning to both the grand scheme of the story, but also to himself. Hugh MacToff spent his whole life working to the point where he got where he wanted to be, and then it became silent. He lost his motivation, he lost his purpose in life, and it became a silent, sad sort of ending for him. He shot a bullet into his head, which is very loud, and then it became silent once more. Same with humanity. Humanity was strong. It built itself up. It went from a dull groan to a calculated shout, and then in the moments of artificial intelligence, when it began to dissipate, it became a sort of shrill shriek, I call it, I think. An indiscriminate shriek. And so that was that theme, that was that motif of loudness, and then in the end it became silent. And then, like with Hugh MacToff and his bullet and into his head and killing him, the planes crashed, and then it became silent upon all of the chaos subsiding. And so I was really glad that I was able to put characterization into Hugh MacToff, because it was only, despite the fact that it was only a 9-page short story and he was only 2 pages of it. And secondly, I really liked that the endling spent his youth getting lost in mazes of buildings and rivers and stuff, but he was always sort of kept safe by the what's it called, by the actors and their sort of hive mind. He was always kept safe. He was actually guided to a path in life of contentment. He was never able to discover a passion of his own, and so they gave him a passion to follow in somebody else's passion. Considering his wife, he believed her to be real, and that he believed that her happiness was something that he could latch onto. He enjoyed being with her. It's in the same vein as the movie Her, with Joaquin Phoenix. It's in the same kind of idea as that. And so he was kept not happy in the end of his life. In the end of his life, when he was holding his wife's hand on the porch in that lakeside property, he was actually only content, as I wrote it. But with the actors sort of giving him a purpose in life and keeping him safe from being lost, it was kind of beautiful to me the way that I sort of humanized the actors, despite the fact that I tell you, and I claim over and over again throughout the themes of the story, that the actors are no more than a program. I sort of humanized them with that. And finally, I really liked that I was able to sort of use the reoccurring word of humanity. Like I kept repeating it over and over, humanity, this and that. But that was entirely intended to make you sort of have the vision in your mind, the imagery of a bustling human society, which it looks like to be. But as I explained in the story, it eventually becomes more actor than humanity. And so this story made me realize that that nothing I ever do will 100% be creative, as in a general term, because obviously somebody on Earth has made this idea, or somebody has thought of this idea, or told someone else about it. This is not a unique idea. The concept that humanity will die due to its own faults and failures in the face of artificial intelligence. It's not unique. The thing that made this story unique, I realize, is my interpretation of it. It's my inclusion of Hugh MacDuff. It's my motif of silence and loudness with him. It's his characterization. It's the endling. It's naming artificial intelligence actors, which is again a double meaning, as I mentioned about the first sentence. It's all of these little things, all of this little world building, the pacing that I was able to do, everything that I wrote in the story in 9 pages came out wonderfully, and I'm so glad that I was able to do it. And I think this is one of my favorite stories right now that I've written, at least for short stories. Skypiercer is my only novel, but that one's pretty sick. I really like The Dead Man's Flat. I really like To Have It All, but particularly I think this is my favorite short story. But anyway, yeah, I have more stuff coming on the way. Just I do whenever I want, upload whenever the heck I feel like it. But yeah, you can watch out for that. I'm gonna have a movie script releasing. I have it already done. It's 200 pages. Sometime eventually I'm gonna get to that. But yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for reading.